A lot of people think an elite woman is defined by luxury labels or an extravagant lifestyle, but the truth is much simpler. It's the tiny things she does every day that build an unshakable presence, a calm confidence, and a standard that quietly sets her apart. These micro habits aren't loud, they're not showy, but they leave a lasting impression on anyone who encounters her. Today, we're exploring the subtle daily choices that strengthen your character, sharpen your energy, and make you look effortlessly elite from the inside out. Micro habit mastery is about consistency, not intensity, and this idea becomes clearer the more you look at how transformation actually happens in a person's life. Most people wait for a huge burst of motivation, a perfect moment, or a dramatic reason to start changing. But elite women operate differently. They understand that the foundation of their identity is built quietly, slowly, through repeated actions that seem almost insignificant in the moment. These tiny actions don't demand applause, they don't ask for attention, and they don't rely on emotion or excitement to stay alive. They become part of who you are because they are simple enough to repeat, and repetition is what rewires your mind, strengthens your discipline, and elevates the standards you hold for yourself. It's not about pushing yourself to extremes, waking up with overwhelming pressure, or forcing yourself into habits that drain your energy. It's about choosing something so small and so manageable that you can do it on your worst day just as easily as you can on your best. That consistency starts to reshape your identity without you even noticing, because when you show up for a tiny task every single day, you teach your mind that you are trustworthy, dependable, and capable of following through. And that quiet internal trust is what builds external confidence. Elite women don't become who they are by doing massive things once in a while. They become who they are because they do small things every day with intention. A tiny act like straightening your posture as soon as you enter a room seems small, but when repeated daily, it changes the way your body carries itself. A small habit like pausing before speaking helps you develop emotional composure over time. A simple micro choice like making your bed every morning trains your mind to create order and clarity before the day begins. These things are easy to dismiss because they aren't dramatic, but their power lies in their ability to shape your internal rhythm. When you keep repeating a tiny behavior, it becomes automatic. And once it becomes automatic, it becomes a part of your identity. Identity is what fuels long-term consistency. Once you see yourself as someone who takes small actions seriously, your life starts to naturally align with that identity. The beauty of micro habits is that they require almost no motivation to begin with. You don't need to be highly inspired or emotionally driven. You just need to commit to something small enough that it feels impossible to fail. This removes the mental resistance that usually stops people from starting altogether. When something is tiny, your brain doesn't feel threatened by it, so you show up again and again, and repetition builds momentum. Over time, momentum becomes confidence, and confidence becomes a lifestyle. That lifestyle begins to reflect in how you speak, how you walk, how you react, and how you handle pressure. People who see you won't be able to understand why your energy feels so grounded and elevated, but it's because your habits have been slowly shaping you in the background. This is why elite women focus on micro actions instead of massive goals. They know that when you obsess over big outcomes, you overwhelm yourself and quit easily. But when you devote yourself to tiny, repeatable behaviors, you build self-discipline without burnout. You create a system that supports your growth every single day. You begin to show up for yourself in ways that feel natural instead of forced. You form a quiet, unshakable consistency that strengthens your confidence from the inside out, shaping your presence and helping you look and feel like the highest version of yourself. Your presence is determined by the smallest behaviors you repeat without thinking, and this truth becomes more powerful when you begin to notice how much of your daily life is shaped by automatic patterns. People often imagine that presence is something dramatic, like having a commanding voice, an expensive wardrobe, or a striking appearance. But presence is much quieter and much deeper than that. It's built from the subtle, almost invisible habits that you've practiced so many times they no longer feel like habits. They feel like you. These tiny behaviors shape the way you carry yourself when you're not performing, not posing, and not trying to impress anyone. They come out when you're distracted, when you're busy, when you're tired, and that's exactly when people observe you the most honestly. The way you walk into a room without realizing it, the way your eyes move when you listen, the way your shoulders lift when you're stressed, the way you place your phone on the table, the way you treat yourself when nobody is watching. These are the micro actions that quietly communicate your confidence, your emotional grounding, and your overall energy. Presence isn't created in the big moments, it's revealed in the small ones. When you repeat a small behavior consistently, it becomes part of your baseline. For example, practicing the habit of standing tall becomes a posture you naturally fall into. Pausing before you respond becomes a reflex that shows emotional self-control. Keeping your voice calm in casual conversations becomes part of your communication style. These are not dramatic behaviors. They are not overly polished or rehearsed. They are tiny actions done again and again until they form the default version of you. People aren't impressed by the version of you that tries too hard. They're influenced by the version of you that is consistent even when you're not thinking about it. That's the version that reveals your authenticity, and authenticity is a huge part of presence. When your small habits align with who you want to be, your presence becomes effortlessly magnetic. Elite presence is never about intensity, it's about quiet repetition. Someone notices how you keep your environment clean without making a show of it. Someone notices how you maintain eye contact long enough to show respect, but not long enough to intimidate. Someone notices how you wait your turn to speak and how you don't rush or overshare. These micro actions add up. They create an aura around you that says you respect yourself and you respect the space you enter. People read those signals instantly, even if they can't explain what they're noticing. Humans interpret presence through small cues, and the more refined your micro habits become, the more refined your aura feels to others. What truly elevates your presence is consistency across situations. If your calm tone shows up at work but disappears at home, it's not part of your identity yet. If your graceful posture appears in photos but not in real life, it's not rooted deeply enough. Presence becomes powerful when your habits follow you everywhere, not because you're trying to maintain an image, but because your behaviors have become automatic. When small habits are repeated, they begin to shape your nervous system, your emotional responses, and your physical rhythm. Over time, your presence becomes predictable, grounded, and strong. People trust predictable energy. People feel safe around someone whose small behaviors reflect self-control and awareness. This is why developing strong micro habits is essential if you want to elevate your presence. You don't need to dramatically change your personality or act like someone else. You only need to refine the tiny behaviors that make up your automatic reactions. These micro habits slowly reshape your character, and your character is what the world experiences as your presence. When the smallest version of you is confident, calm, and intentional, every room feels different when you walk in, not because you demand attention, but because your presence speaks before you do. The most elite women lead with self-respect before anything external, and this truth becomes clearer the more you pay attention to the way they move through the world. Self-respect is not a loud performance, it's not a declaration, and it's not something you prove to other people. It is a quiet, steady standard you hold for yourself in every situation, even when no one is around to applaud it. It shows up in the way you speak to yourself, the way you care for your body, the boundaries you set, the energy you allow into your life, and the habits you choose to maintain. When self-respect becomes the root of your daily actions, every other part of your life starts to elevate naturally. You no longer chase validation. You no longer adapt to be liked. You no longer shrink to make others comfortable. You operate from a place of inner groundedness that people can feel instantly. This is what makes elite women look elite long before the clothes, the career, the lifestyle, or the achievements. Their identity is built from the inside out through micro moments where they choose dignity over impulse, intention over pressure, and clarity over chaos. Leading with self respect means you treat yourself like someone whose time matters, whose emotions matter, and whose well being matters. It starts with small habits that reinforce your value. You keep promises to yourself even when no one will know if you break them. You give yourself enough rest not because it's a luxury, but because it's a requirement. You protect your space by removing people who drain you, even if it's uncomfortable. You speak to yourself with kindness instead of harsh criticism. These micro choices shape how you see yourself, and how you see yourself determines how the world sees you. When your inner dialogue is respectful, your outer behavior becomes respectful. When your habits reflect care, your presence reflects confidence. People who encounter you will sense a kind of quiet strength, not because you're trying to impress them, but because you treat yourself in a way that naturally elevates your energy. Self-respect is also reflected in the boundaries you set. Elite women are not guarded or cold, they are simply clear. They know what they will accept, what they won't, and what aligns with their peace. But these boundaries don't begin in major confrontations. They start in the smallest micro habits. You stop apologizing for things that are not your fault. You stop explaining yourself to people who don't listen. You stop saying yes when your body is telling you no. You stop tolerating behavior that makes you feel less than who you are. Each tiny act of protecting your peace builds a stronger sense of self, and over time, that sense of self becomes unshakable. You no longer bend for approval because your approval of yourself holds more power. You no longer accept disrespect because you've trained yourself to recognize your worth long before someone threatens it. Another part of leading with self-respect is maintaining standards in private. How you treat your space when no one visits, how you dress when no one sees you, how you speak when you're alone, how you show up for your responsibilities without waiting for an audience. These little behaviors create the foundation of your identity. An elite woman doesn't act high value. She becomes high value through repetition of standards that make her life orderly, peaceful, and meaningful. When you consistently choose small actions that honor your well-being, you subtly train others to treat you with the same level of respect. People respond to the energy you set, and when your energy is grounded in self-respect, they naturally rise to meet it. Leading with self-respect is not about perfection, but about awareness. It is the awareness that every tiny choice communicates something about how you see yourself. When you choose habits that honor you, you cultivate an inner environment that radiates strength, elegance, and alignment. And that inner environment becomes visible in the way you walk, the way you speak, the way you think, and the way you interact with the world. Tiny habits shape the tone of every interaction you have, and the more you look at the subtle details of human behavior, the clearer this becomes. The tone you bring into a conversation or a room isn't created by the big moments or the carefully planned gestures. It's shaped by the micro choices that happen almost instantly and almost subconsciously. These little habits reveal how emotionally regulated you are, how confident you feel, how grounded your energy is, and how much respect you hold for yourself and others. When an elite woman interacts with someone, what makes her stand out is not a dramatic display of confidence, but the quiet presence she carries. And that presence is the result of countless small habits repeated day after day. The way she breathes before responding, the softness or steadiness of her voice, the patience in her timing, the calmness in her body language, the clarity in her eye contact. Each of these micro behaviors builds an atmosphere that others can feel immediately. People are not responding to her words alone. They are responding to her tone, and that tone is shaped by habits she developed long before the conversation even started. Every small habit you practice in private shows up in public interactions. If you practice stretching your patience, you naturally become someone who stays composed in difficult conversations. If you practice stillness in moments of stress, you become someone whose presence brings stability rather than chaos. If you practice listening without interrupting, your conversations feel more meaningful and grounded. These things are not random, they are practiced. Tiny habits are like invisible tools that shape your communication style without you having to try. And because they are subtle, people experience them as authenticity. They feel that you are genuinely calm, genuinely attentive, genuinely present, even though what they are sensing is actually the accumulation of micro behaviors you've trained into your daily life. Your tone is also influenced by the micro habits that manage your emotional state. When you build the habit of pausing instead of reacting, you create space between your emotion and your response. That space gives you control. It allows you to choose a tone that reflects confidence rather than insecurity. It helps you avoid rushing, snapping, or oversharing. When you practice regulating your breathing when you feel stressed, your voice becomes steadier without you forcing it. When you practice gratitude in small moments, your overall energy becomes softer, warmer, and more centered. These tiny habits create an emotional foundation that follows you everywhere. And because your emotional foundation is stable, your tone becomes stable, no matter who you are talking to. The tone of your interactions is shaped long before the interaction begins. It begins with how you speak to yourself in your mind. If you practice a micro habit of replacing negative self-talk with a more supportive inner voice, your outer voice naturally becomes more confident and respectful. If you build the habit of organizing your space, your energy becomes clearer, and people feel that clarity when they speak to you. If you form the habit of keeping your posture open and relaxed, you automatically send a message of confidence without saying anything at all. These micro habits work together to shape the way you come across, even when you think no one is paying attention. People often think that improving communication means learning scripts or memorizing techniques, but the truth is, communication is shaped by who you are in the smallest moments. When tiny habits become consistent patterns, your presence shifts. You start treating interactions with more intention, and others feel that intention. You begin showing up with a tone that is steady, respectful, and grounded, and people respond to you with the same energy. Tiny habits don't just elevate your character, they elevate your relationships by transforming the atmosphere you bring into every conversation. Over time, you become someone who naturally carries influence, not because you talk the loudest, but because your tone communicates a quiet strength that speaks for you. Elevation begins with awareness of who you are when no one is watching, and this awareness is built through the smallest moments of your day, the ones that feel forgettable, the ones that seem too ordinary to matter. But these moments matter more than anything else because they reveal the version of you that is real, unfiltered, and free from performance. When people talk about becoming elite, refined, or elevated, they often imagine making big changes or achieving something impressive. But true elevation doesn't come from those big, dramatic moments. It comes from your private decisions, your quiet habits, and the way you choose to show up for yourself when there is no audience and no pressure to impress. The version of you that exists behind closed doors is the version that determines your confidence, your discipline, your emotional stability, and your sense of identity. Elevation begins in those private spaces where your character is shaped one tiny habit at a time. Awareness in your private life is what forms the foundation of your public presence. When you know who you are in silence, you don't feel the need to prove yourself in noise. This is why elite women carry themselves with such calm confidence. They know who they are without the influence of comparison, validation, or external expectations. They have spent enough time observing their choices, noticing their patterns, and understanding their triggers. They are aware of the habits that serve them and the habits that drain them. They take responsibility for refining themselves in small ways that most people overlook. They choose order over chaos in their personal space. They choose discipline over distraction in their routines. They choose accountability over excuses in their setbacks. This self-awareness builds a deep inner stability that people can sense before they even speak. When elevation begins in private, your actions become aligned with your values. You start recognizing when you are acting from insecurity rather than confidence. You begin noticing when you are reacting instead of responding. You learn to identify the things that disrupt your peace and the things that strengthen it. This awareness allows you to make different choices, even if the choices are small. Maybe it's the choice to put your phone down instead of mindlessly scrolling. Maybe it's the choice to tidy your space instead of letting clutter take over. Maybe it's the choice to breathe before replying, to stretch before bed, to hydrate before coffee, to show up for yourself in 5-minute rituals that seem small but shift the entire tone of your life. These choices build self-respect, and that self-respect becomes visible in your presence. It's in private moments that you also discover the habits that no longer serve the identity you want to embody. You start to notice when procrastination is really avoidance, when overthinking is really fear, when inconsistency is really lack of clarity. Awareness gives you the power to rewrite patterns in gentle, practical ways. You don't fix everything at once. You simply begin making tiny adjustments that align your daily behavior with the elevated version of yourself you want to grow into. Bit by bit, you become more intentional with your time, more discerning with your energy, and more grounded in your choices. People around you may not see the work you're doing behind the scenes, but they will feel the difference in your aura. Elevation grows as you become more honest with yourself, honest about your habits, your reactions, your boundaries, your strengths, your weaknesses. This honesty isn't harsh, it's empowering. It allows you to understand yourself deeply enough to make lasting changes. And the more aware you become of your private self, the more effortless your growth becomes. You no longer rely on external motivation because your motivation comes from within. Your habits become supportive instead of exhausting. Your energy becomes consistent instead of unpredictable. Your confidence becomes genuine instead of performed. When you understand who you are in solitude, you walk into the world with a presence that feels composed, elevated, and unmistakably strong.